The primary theme of Silent Hill 2's story is truth. Every single character in the game has some truth they are either refusing to accept or running away from. Despite how twisted and warped and bizarre it might appear, Silent Hill's Otherworld is actually a place defined by truth. It shows these characters who they really are. Through elaborate illusion, it forces them to confront reality. I am going to focus my analysis on 3 characters: James, Angela, and Eddie. Each of these characters is actually denying 2 truths. One big obvious truth, and then a subtler, uglier, more sinister truth lying underneath. It is this second truth that ultimately destroys them. Because in the world of Silent Hill 2, truth is not healing, not nourishing. Sometimes fans treat Silent Hill 2 as if it is some big therapy session, as if the town is just trying to help these characters overcome their denial and become better people. If anything, it is the exact opposite. James, Angela, and Eddie are all crushed by the truth. They are tortured by it. As we see very intimately in James' storyline, the truth is a hellscape to him. It is a strange and cruel nightmare full of hideous monsters from which he cannot escape. Okay, so let's talk more about James. In the very first shot of the game, we see him gazing into a bathroom mirror, into his own shadowy reflection. In the visual language of film, just about any time you see a character looking into a mirror this way, and so you see 2 versions of the same character on screen at the same time, this doubling effect is meant to communicate that this character has another self, often a darker self. There is more to him than meets the eye. At the start of the game, James is presented as a quiet and thoughtful character. He is wounded and full of sorrow. He lost his wife to an unnamed disease 3 years ago, and has never recovered from that loss. He is defined more than anything by his love for her, by how much he is willing to do for her, how much terror and pain and suffering he is willing to endure over the course of this story just for the slim chance that she might somehow, impossibly, be waiting for him somewhere in this town. He is on a journey down into unfathomable darkness. Most sane people would have given up and turned around and run away very early into this story. For James to keep going forward despite all the terrible things that happened to him, there must be something really profound fueling his determination. And the source of that determination can only be his love for his late wife Mary, which is apparently enough to drive him to do almost anything. Except maybe not, but we'll discuss that more later. In his interactions with other characters, James tends to be soft-spoken, polite, kind, and moral. He wants to help Angela, wants to deter her from self-harm. He tries to persuade Eddie to flee to safety. He wants to keep Laura and Maria safe too. He seems like a good person. But every now and then we see glimpses of his other self, the darkness within him, like when he angrily accuses Laura of being a liar. And of course, towards the end of the game, that darkness is put on full display when it is revealed that he murdered his own wife. She did not die of her disease. She died by suffocation, as her own husband brutally smothered her face with a pillow. There was a monster lurking inside this seemingly soft-spoken good guy all along. But that is only the big obvious truth. That is not the truth that destroys him. There is something even worse, even more terrible yet to be revealed. James is not only in denial that he was the one who killed his wife, he is also in denial over when his wife's death occurred. He believes she died 3 years ago, when in reality, he murdered her days ago at most. It happened very recently. But why? Why this denial of the timeline? What happened during those 3 years that he does not want to remember? Well, after defeating Pyramid Head, the avatar of his guilt and shame and desire for punishment, and while he approaches the final confrontation with Maria, who is the avatar of his inability to let go of his wife after her death, we hear an echo of an interaction between James and Mary, and this interaction shows us what he is truly running from. We are going to listen to this echo together now, and as you listen, ask yourself, what is being revealed here? And what makes this an even more terrible revelation than the fact that he killed his own wife? Okay, here it is.
What do you want, James? Flowers? I don't want any damn flowers. Just go home already. Look at me. I'm disgusting. Between the disease and the drugs, I look like a monster. Well, what are you looking at? Get the hell out of here. Leave me alone already. I'm no use to anyone. I'll be dead soon anyway. It'd be easier if they just killed me. But I guess the hospital's making a nice profit off of me. Why are you still here? I told you to go. Are you deaf? Don't come back. James. Wait. Please. Don't go. Don't leave me alone. I didn't mean what I said. Please. Tell me it'll be okay. Tell me I'm not gonna die. Help me.
In this echo, we are witnessing the disintegration of James and Mary's relationship. For most of the story, Mary does not get a lot of character development. Because she is already dead at the start, she does not appear much on screen, only in little brief flashbacks, where she is portrayed as a vaguely loving and tender wife. She is less of a character and more of an idealized archetype, something for James to pursue, to long for. But in this echo, she suddenly bursts out onto the stage as a very complex and human character. She expresses a wide range of complicated and contradictory emotions. Confronted by her own mortality, by the fact that nothing would stop the disease, that she was going to die, she suffered from a kind of emotional collapse. She swung from hope to hopelessness, from denial to depression to anger. She became filled with rage. She lashed out at the people closest to her. She made them feel the same misery that she felt. And then afterwards, she was overcome by sadness, by a need for human connection and comfort, by a need to be with the very person she had just pushed away. This is what James is really hiding from, the fact that his relationship with her had collapsed. That, because he could not handle her emotional distress, he had essentially abandoned her in the hospital, all alone with her pain and sickness. As Laura says, eventually James stopped visiting her at all because he could not face her rage or her misery. He was too weak. In their final interaction in the other world, James at first tries to claim that her murder was altruistic, that he was simply ending her suffering for her sake. But then he corrects himself. The truth was, he did it for himself. He did it because he had grown to hate her, hate what she had done to him. The miserable person she had turned him into, the way her sickness had taken over his life. He hated her for making him hate her. He wanted it to all be over. The reason why he cuts all 3 of those years out of his memory is because it was during those 3 years that his love for Mary was truly tested, and he failed. His love was not strong enough. He was not strong enough. Her sickness, her rage, transformed him first into a coward and then into a killer. He wants to forget all of that and only remember the time when they were in love, before it all went wrong. It was not the truth of what he had done that he could not face, it was the truth of who he was, who he had become. There is an ending where James leaves the town with Laura, apparently healed by his experience in Silent Hill, where he is somehow able to not only move past his wife's murder, but also what that murder revealed about him and who he truly is. But there are more endings where he is not able to heal and move on, where he either desperately clings to some version of Mary or where he chooses to destroy himself. The other two characters we are going to discuss do not receive these generous options. They do not get any chance to heal and leave and move on. Angela and Eddie both only get one ending, and it is not a happy one. But before we move on, I do quickly want to talk about something else. This is probably going to sound like a crazy comparison, but Joel from The Last of Us always reminded me of James. Okay, let me explain. These are not just the main characters of their respective stories, but the player characters. Because we are in direct control of them, I think we naturally develop an intimacy with them. These characters are us to some extent. They are our avatars in this fictional world. Their success or failure is our success or failure. And perhaps even more than that, because we spend so much time with them, we witness their humanity. We see them at their best. When they're fighting to do the right thing, we see their suffering and their pain, and how hard they fight to overcome each challenge. We become deeply invested in their journeys. And so when we finally see them commit these terrible, awful, perhaps even unforgivable crimes, it can lead to a really fascinating emotional experience for the audience. How do we react when these characters, who we have invested so much time and feeling into, when they do things that we ourselves would never choose to do, that we cannot condone or justify? You can see similar audience reactions to both characters. Sometimes people will finish the games and say, "Oh, Joel or James is a monster, a criminal, a murderer, a terrible, evil person, and I don't like him just one bit." It's almost as if they have been betrayed by that character. At the other end of the perspective, you have people saying things like, "Oh, I love James or Joel. I feel so close to him. I wish he was my dad or my husband. Everything he did was justified." Of course, there is a middle road here where we can recognize that these characters are written to be complicated and contradictory, to be both generous and selfish, to be both empathetic and monstrous, which makes them feel far more real than a character who is only evil or only good. I guess I don't have a real point here, I just find the comparison interesting. Anyway, let's move on to the second character from Silent Hill 2 that we are going to discuss, Angela. In many ways, Angela is clearly intended to serve as a foil to James. She is on a very similar quest to his own. She has come to this strange town in search of someone close to her, someone she cares very deeply for. In her case, she is searching for her mother. Their two journeys parallel each other. She explores her own nightmare world, her own personal psychological hellscape. Just like James, there are two truths to be revealed in her background. A big obvious one, and then a much uglier and more sinister truth underneath. She is slowly ground down by her time in Silent Hill, and by the end has seemingly given up all hope. Her ultimate fate demonstrates one possible end to his own story. But let's start over from the beginning. We first meet Angela in the graveyard near the beginning of the game. With this setting, the writers are immediately making a connection between her character and death, mortality, and melancholy. Her behavior feels distinctly off in this first scene, like there's something not quite right here. She is very young and completely alone. She seems a bit confused. She is looking for multiple family members, but does not appear to have any clue where any of them might be. She is anxious and nervous and suspicious, and she offers this vague warning about the town. You shouldn't go there, there's something wrong, maybe dangerous. The next time we see her is in the apartment building, and notice how the writers are reusing this doubling imagery with the mirror. Once again, through the visual language of the scene, they are telling us there is something else to this girl. She is more than she appears to be. In this scene, she is portrayed to be depressed and clearly experiencing some suicidal ideation. She is emotionally erratic, switching dramatically between melancholy and accusatory, from panicked and defensive to pleading and desperate. She is all over the emotional map. She has some serious psychological wounds. James takes away her knife, so at least for now, she cannot act on any thoughts of self-harm she might have. The remake added a new scene with her in the park, but I'm gonna skip right past it, to the next scene, which takes place down in the labyrinth. This is one of the most disturbing scenes in the entire Silent Hill franchise, and has only become more so with the changes made in the remake. This is the Abstract Daddy boss fight. This monster is shaped like two human figures lying on a mattress. One figure is larger than the other, and the larger one is lying on top of the smaller, in a position that is clearly meant to appear sexual. In the remake, this monster chases our character through a nightmare version of Angela's childhood home, seemingly unstoppable, where the only safe place is in a little closet with a stuffed animal, the sort of place a child might hide. It is one of the most genuinely terrifying and unsettling sequences I have ever seen in a horror video game. It is masterclass work. This is the reveal of the big obvious truth in Angela's storyline. Her father emotionally, physically, and sexually abused her, and in the end she killed him to save herself. But believe it or not, there is an even worse truth yet to be revealed here. Her storyline is about as dark gets. Following this boss fight, Angela, in a rage, accuses James of pursuing her, of having ulterior motives for helping her, and of being unfaithful to his wife, all of which she somewhat weakly attempts to deny. And then she leaves, saying that she still needs to find her mother. In her desire to find her, there's a suggestion that even though her father was a monster, maybe she had a good relationship with the other parent. Maybe her mother was her safe haven, her protector, someone who loved and cared about her, you know, the way a parent is supposed to. However, in her final scene, something else is revealed, that subtler, uglier truth, the one that finally destroys her. Just like last time, we are going to watch this scene together and once again ask yourself, what is being revealed here and why is it even worse than what we've already been shown? Okay, here it is.
Mama? Mama! I was looking for you. You're the only one left. Maybe then I can finally rest. Mama. What's wrong? Wait. You're not my mama. It's you.
Sorry, Angela. I think you were right. What we're looking for, it's not here. Not anymore.
Thank you for helping me earlier. But I wish you hadn't. Even Mama said it. I deserve what happened.
No, Angela, that is not true.
Don't pity me. I'm not worth it. Or maybe you think you can save me? Will you love me? Care for me? heal all my pain? That's what I thought. James. Give me back the knife.
No, I won't.
Saving it for yourself. Have it your way. It doesn't change anything.
In this scene, it is revealed that Angela's mother, that person she has been so desperately searching for the entire game, the one we thought might be the good parent, the one who really cared for and loved her daughter, was actually just as horrid and hideous as her father. Angela did not have any safe haven. She did not have anyone to protect her. She has spent all this time searching for someone who does not want her. And when she finally accepts this truth, it destroys her. She has nothing left to cling to. Just like with James, the town of Silent Hill has forced her to confront reality, and that reality might as well be hell. For this one scene, we see Silent Hill from her perspective, a place permanently burning, a place of fire and pain, flames that can never be put out, damage that can never be repaired. She has come to believe that no one will ever love her, care for her, or heal all of her pain. How could they if even her mother did not? James' silence in the face of her question only confirms it for her. That is when she asks for the knife back. She has made a decision. Her time in Silent Hill has caused her to finally lose all hope. In this moment, she chooses self-destruction. And listen to how calm and cold her voice is when she asks for the knife. How the emotion has drained from her voice, as if she is empty and hollow. This mirrors a potential end for James' own story, in which he drives his car into the lake. There is a note you can find in the hospital which discusses a patient. This patient suffers from some form of hallucinations or delusions. He has crossed over to somewhere else, probably Silent Hill's other world. However, suffer is not really the correct word, because his delusions are more pleasant than reality. He is happy there. The doctor writing the note questions whether it is really the right thing to force the patient out of that happy fake world and into harsh, unhappy reality. We could ask the same question about Angela. Is she really better off knowing the truth? Or was she better off when she believed a lie? When she believed her mother still loved her, still wanted her? When that belief still gave her some form of hope to cling to? Of course, the story of Silent Hill 2 offers no objective answer to that question. It is left to the audience to ponder. We still have one character left to discuss, Eddie. Eddie is another foil to James. Whereas Angela reflects his misery and his depression, Eddie reflects his violence, his resentment, those uglier aspects of his personality. Unlike the other two, Eddie is not searching for anyone. Instead, he is running away, looking for somewhere to hide. In the same way that Silent Hill creates Maria, a living, breathing, sentient person, a fulfillment of James' desire to reunite with his dead wife, a reflection of his own psyche, it also creates something similar for Eddie. Instead of a woman, it is a man, and instead of a lover, he is very much a hater. Eddie is pursued throughout the nightmare by this man. This is an incarnation of one of Eddie's bullies, one of his tormentors out in the real world. In Silent Hill, this man follows him deeper and deeper into the town's other world, mocking him, insulting him, humiliating him relentlessly, imitating the real-life persecution that Eddie feels. And eventually, Eddie cannot take it anymore. He kills this man. In the same way that the town fulfills James' wish to reunite with his late wife in a twisted way via Maria, it fulfills Eddie's wish to take revenge on his tormentor, to have power over him via this man. But then the bully just comes back. Just like it does with Maria, Silent Hill keeps creating new versions of this guy, no matter how many are killed, and their mockery of Eddie becomes more twisted and more relentless until he finally breaks. But let's rewind back to the start of Eddie's story. In his very first scene, James finds Eddie puking his guts out in this disgusting, crummy bathroom. Eddie is meant to look pathetic and weak here. This is a humiliating position to be in, and that is furthered by his weight too. Eddie is fat. He is very fat. I mean, I'm fat bred, and I'm not even as fat as this guy. A lot of times in fiction, overweight characters are portrayed to be ridiculous and silly, unattractive, not to be taken seriously. I'm not saying that is a fair portrayal, but it is a common portrayal in fiction. He immediately begins making excuses for himself, pleading innocence before he even gets accused of anything. He doesn't even seem to know what he's claiming to be innocent of at first. He just says, "I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. It wasn't me." Recognizing how helpless this kid is, James tells him to depart the town, to run away to safety, and then leaves the kid behind in this bathroom, even after Eddie asks James to come with him. In a very subtle way, James is, unintentionally, treating Eddie the same way his bullies do, not taking him seriously, talking down to him. This creates a budding resentment which will eventually blossom into deadly violence. In his next appearance, we find Eddie speaking with Laura. She actually gives him some decent, if naive, advice. He reveals to her that the police are after him, and she tells him that, instead of running away, he should just go back wherever he came from and apologize. Of course, an apology will definitely not solve all of his problems, but she is right that his only chance of salvation is to stop running away and face his problems head on. Unfortunately for him, he never heeds her advice. This scene plays out slightly differently in the two different versions of the game. In the remake, it takes place in a movie theater, and Eddie is stuffing his face with a bucket full of sticky strawberry sauce. In the original, it takes place in a bowling alley, and Eddie is eating an inexplicably fresh pizza, which leads to one of my all-time favorite lines in any horror game.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
She said she was fine by herself.
On the one hand, this scene is hilarious. This is one of the most frightening and bizarre horror games ever made, and here is this dude just casually stuffing his fat face full of pizza while the world around him descends into madness. But on the other hand, I empathize with Eddie so very strongly here. I know this might sound silly, but this really is kind of like just looking at a reflection of myself. This is stress eating. This is a guy who feels terrible about himself, who's having an awful, terrible, very bad day, and so in order to comfort himself, he is eating and eating and eating because it's the only thing that can make him feel better. This is what depression looks like. This is what giving up looks like. I know because I've done it. And once again, Eddie is being portrayed as silly, ridiculous, pathetic, and basically harmless. He's just a big, fat, lazy loser doing exactly what big, fat, lazy losers do. The remake has added an additional line though. James throws an empty pizza box aside and says, "I see you've gotten your appetite back." And then watch Eddie's reaction. The clear resentment, the embarrassment, the anger he feels towards James is growing, becoming uglier, and James does not even realize what he's doing. In his next scene, Eddie's behavior begins to change, becomes far more unsettling. Okay, so James drops down into the prison. This is the point in the game where reality itself begins to break down, to no longer make sense, when the town of Silent Hill begins to feel less like a real town and more like a twisted nightmare. The story is getting darker and darker too. Maria has been killed, James has failed to protect her, failed to reach Laura, failed to find his wife. Things are becoming more and more hopeless. And then here is Eddie, sitting in the darkness alone beside a dead body, holding a revolver and reciting a bizarre monologue about how easy it is to kill someone, about how quickly a life can be destroyed. At this point, Eddie has discovered that he does have an alternative to running. Instead, he can choose violence. He has come to the stunned realization that he can just kill all of the people who torment him. With this realization, his character has begun a sudden and dramatic slide into darkness. However, he has not yet fully embraced this choice. He plays off this monologue like it was just a big joke, like he's the same ridiculous, pathetic fat guy he was before, but we've seen the darkness in him. We will watch his final scene together, and this time, as we watch, I want to ask you a different question. How does Eddie's behavior here mirror James' own choices? In what way are these two characters actually very similar? Okay, here it is.
Couldn't leave well enough alone, huh? You just had to follow me all the way out here. How many times do I have to kill you?
Eddie. Whoa, Eddie. It's me.
Oh. Hi, James.
Eddie, what are you doing?
What's it look like I'm doing? You fat, disgusting piece of shit, you make me sick. You gonna cry, fat ass? You gonna run to your mama? Waste of skin, why don't you just kill yourself? Well, maybe he was right. Maybe I am nothing but a fat, disgusting piece of shit. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And a corpse can't laugh!
Eddie.
What's that? You want to talk down to me some more? Tell me to relax? You're just like the rest of them, James.
No, I don't want...
Shut up! You think I'm stupid. You think I don't see it. But you've been laughing at me all along. Ever since we first met. But you ain't laughing now, are you?
You need help, Eddie.
Don't get all holy on me, James. This town called you too. You and me are the same. We're not like other people, don't you know that? Well, you're about to find out.
The big obvious truth in Eddie's story is the relentless and vicious bullying he has experienced, and also the way he has internalized that bullying. He speaks about himself with the same language his bullies use. He has begun to believe these things about himself. Maybe I am a fat, disgusting piece of shit. He has given up. He will never try to be anything more than the caricature his bullies make him out to be. Eddie is someone who has been portrayed as weak and powerless throughout this story. But now he has finally found a way to make himself feel powerful. He has discovered nihilism. He has discovered violence. If he can kill his bullies, then he is the one with all the power. This choice reflects James' own decision to murder his wife. He took control of his own miserable situation in the exact same way, by simply killing the problem. In this scene, Eddie becomes a reflection of James' worst self. For a little while, Eddie is in total control of this scene. Notice the way he interrupts all of James' lines, the way he dominates the conversation, but it does not last. Eventually, James pushes back, reasserts control. That is what the punch to the face is, and once again, Eddie is left in an embarrassing position, lying on his back on the ground, overpowered by another man. But this time, he refuses to accept it. He desperately fights to cling to this newfound power. The subtler second truth in Eddie's story is the way his bullying has twisted his personality, turned him paranoid, depressed, and full of hate. Again, this clearly mirrors the exact same transformation James underwent during those 3 years of his wife's illness. From loving husband into murderous monster. This boss battle, like so many other boss battles I have discussed in other games on this channel, is really a confrontation between the protagonist and the worst version of himself. Usually, when a protagonist defeats a dark reflection like this, It is meant to be a demonstration of some sort of character growth, of strength, but not this time. James feels terrible for having killed another human being, for having once again failed. This is one of James' darkest moments. On this channel, I have often discussed the genre of cosmic horror, and the unique way that cosmic horror stories tend to twist the search for the truth. In most stories, the search for the truth is depicted as noble, honorable, and a morally good one. Scientists and investigators and detectives doing what is right because the truth is right. But in cosmic horror, the search for the truth often leads characters to discover hideous, terrible things about the nature of reality, or the nature of the universe, or the nature of humanity's place in that universe. These revelations break their minds, cause them to go insane. Now, I do not think Silent Hill 2 can be labeled as cosmic horror, but its depiction of the theme of truth is very similar. However, instead of it being big, grand, huge truths about the nature of the universe that destroy these characters, it is small, intimate truths. James being unable to deal with the way his relationship with his wife collapsed. Angela being unable to accept that her own mother did not love or protect her. These small, intimate truths end up being just as destructive as the big, huge ones. Angela chooses self-destruction, Eddie chooses violence, and depending on the ending, James chooses to drive his car into the lake. In this way, the story of Silent Hill 2 demonstrates the fraught nature of the truth. How it is not the monsters who will destroy us, but ourselves. Those inconvenient truths about ourselves that we would rather just ignore. Those inner demons whose voices we refuse to acknowledge.